For the longest time, we thought about life as this beautifully precise machine where every single part had one and only one fixed purpose. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if life is less like a machine and a whole lot more like a musician? We're going to dive into this revolutionary shift in biology and see how it pretty much changes everything we thought we knew. So, the best way to get our heads around this is to think about these two really powerful metaphors. On one side, you've got the machine. It's all about the blueprint, it's rigid, predictable, just executing a program. That was the classic view, right? The one we all learned. But on the other side, you've got the musician, fluid, improvisational, performing a score with their own interpretation. And that is where biology is heading. Let's find out why. Okay, so to really get why this new idea is such a game changer, we have to go back and appreciate the old way of thinking. I mean, it was elegant, it was powerful, and for decades, it worked just about perfectly. I mean, think about it. When Watson and Crick discovered the double helix structure of DNA, it felt like we'd finally found it, the ultimate blueprint for life. Information seemed to flow in this simple, predictable, straight line. And this whole idea became the absolute bedrock of molecular biology. And this concept was so powerful, it got cemented in millions of textbooks as the central dogma. It's super straightforward. One gene makes one specific protein structure, and that one protein does one specific job. Simple, linear, predictable. Case closed, right? So this gave us this really strong image, the cell as a kind of molecular factory. Every protein was like a perfectly made tool, fitting its target like a key in a lock. Everything had its place, its single purpose. But, as you know, science is never that simple for very long. And sure enough, little puzzles started popping up. These little ripples on the smooth surface of this perfect machine-like picture that just didn't quite make sense. So first, scientists found these things called introns, parts of genes that were just snipped out and thrown away. Then they discovered something called alternative splicing, which showed that a single gene could somehow crank out several different proteins. This flew right in the face of the one gene, one protein rule. And then came the big shocker. The Human Genome Project showed that we humans only have about 20,000 genes, way fewer than a lot of simpler organisms. So where was all our complexity coming from? For a really long time, the answer was basically to just ignore the parts that didn't fit the model. The vast, vast majority of our genetic code didn't seem to make proteins, which were supposed to be the main event. And so this mysterious stuff just got dismissed and slapped with a label, junk DNA. And this is where the sheer scale of the mystery just hits you. It turns out that only a tiny 1 to 2% of our entire genome actually makes the proteins, a tiny fraction. So this brings us to the central, unavoidable question that the old machine model just couldn't handle. If our bodies are spending all this energy copying all this DNA every single time a cell divides, and we know natural selection is incredibly efficient, what in the world is the other 98% for? Well, the answer required a whole new way of thinking. It meant we had to throw out the factory blueprint and instead pick up the sheet music for a jazz ensemble. The breakthrough wasn't finding a more complicated machine. No, it was realizing that the cell isn't a factory at all. It's a dynamic, improvising orchestra. And all that so-called junk DNA, that was the music. We now know that a staggering 85% of our genome gets transcribed into something called non-coding RNA. This isn't junk at all. It's a massive communication and regulatory network. It's the conductor of the orchestra, telling the players when to play, how loud to play, and for how long. But honestly, the biggest surprise of all came from the players themselves, the proteins. The truly revolutionary discovery was finding proteins that completely shatter that old lock and key model. These are proteins that have no fixed, stable structure whatsoever, and yet they're perfectly functional. And this is where we meet the star improvisers of the cell. You've got moonlighting proteins that can do completely different jobs depending on the situation. You've got fold-switching proteins that can literally change their entire shape and their function to match. And then you have these amazing, intrinsically disordered proteins. They are gloriously unstructured, like flexible hubs that are constantly changing shape to manage signals and adapt to what the cell needs. They are the ultimate biological jazz musicians. So what emerges from all this is a brilliant new picture of life. It's not static, it's not fixed, it's this fluid, dynamic, interconnected network that is constantly sensing its environment and improvising a response. It's a creative process, through and through. So what's the big takeaway here? What does all this mean?
Well, it means we've kind of been reading the music of life all wrong. We've thrown out the old rigid rulebook and picked up a new, much more dynamic score.
The old view, that was all about genetic determinism. DNA was a fixed blueprint, end of story. The new view is all about elastic interpretation. The genetic code isn't a blueprint that has to be followed. It's more like a rich musical score that the cell gets to perform and interpret in a million different ways depending on the context.
So if there's one thing to take away from this, let it be this. Life isn't just built like a machine following instructions. It is performed, moment to moment, with layers upon layers of regulation and interpretation guiding the whole show. The cell isn't a factory executing a program, it's a musician performing a masterpiece.
This new understanding just blows the doors wide open. It replaces a rigid, deterministic world with one that is fluid, adaptive, and endlessly inventive. Which leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. If life truly is an improvisation, what kind of music is it going to perform next?